Okay, and happy to see new faces, but also existing friends. Hi, Tim. Hi, Kevin. Glad to see you here. Tim's in Cape Cod and is an excellent product manager, and Kevin is in Santa Cruz and is pretty much an API and MCP expert. So hopefully he'll help me answer some questions if you have them. Hey, Ben. All right, so let's get started today with build AI ready APIs with MCP. And this will be an introductory session into APIs and MCP. We'll build out a kind of hello world, a very simple example of an MCP server to help us test our APIs with AI and MCP. So before we actually get started, if you want to follow along, if you want to do the demo yourself and follow the steps that I'll be showing, please download a file from GitHub. You'll find it at tinyurl.com/API MCP demo, or scan the QR code, and also I'll put it here in the chat. What is in this file? It's all the links of the tools and kind of the instructions that we're going to use. So if you want to follow along, please grab this file, open it up, and start clicking on the link, start seeing what we're going to do. If you don't want to follow along, that's fine too. We'll record everything. Hopefully the demo will go well, and then you can follow along at your own pace. And that QR code and link is going to show up in all of our slides as we move forward. So um, was anyone able to get to that file on GitHub? It kind of looks like this. It's just a file of instructions and link. Throw me a thumbs up if you're able to get to the file. Okay, Tim was able to get to the file. Awesome. We know it works. Ron too. Hey, Ron. So let's get going here. What are we going to talk about in the next 45 minutes? Well, first, we're going to talk about why MCP is important to you as API product managers and what it's going to mean for your API strategy. We're going to very quickly talk about the current state of MCP, and then we'll go to a hands-on demo. We'll generate a very simple hello world MCP server from OpenAPI, and hopefully people here are familiar with OpenAPI. If not, let me know in the chat and we'll do a quick intro. And then finally, we'll talk about where you can go from there, what you can learn more about the topic and how you can level up your knowledge. And then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A, of course. So what is MCP? I'm sure you've heard about it. There's a lot of buzz. And for a technology that was introduced actually less or maybe to the day 6 months ago in November 2024. Here's the announcement, November 25, 2024. Anthropic introduced a protocol such that we can connect LLMs and, of course, agents to other resources. And these resources could be files, it could be databases, data in databases, it could be your repositories in GitHub, but it could also be APIs, which is interesting for our discussion here. Now, it is an open standard. They put it out on GitHub, and it's evolving ever since. Lots of traction, lots of evolution, lots of news on it. And also, it's been called the kind of USB-C of AI apps. It's really not an accurate description, but it describes the intent, which is, hey, I want to connect anything with an LLM or an agent. So in that sense, it's a little bit of a universal connector. All right. So why should you, as a product manager or as an API provider, be paying attention to this technology? Well, the first thing is that MCP lets agents or LLMs have access to your API. And that wasn't very effectively possible before. OpenAI had done something with it, but it didn't really work. And MCP is the first time where we can have actual APIs be invoked from inside an LLM or an agent. So that's a huge opportunity because if you open up your APIs to agents, you could dramatically um, uh, increase the usage of your APIs and the use of your APIs. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of extend your product to more use. And if you are betting, as I am, that agents are going to proliferate, then it follows that you will benefit from that added traffic. Now, the technology allows you to publish yourself MCP servers or um, a facade, if you will, for your APIs and be in control of what that looks like. So you could publish one MCP server and many clients, many people, many agents could come and access that MCP server and actually see your API. And, those clients can be agents, it can be LLMs such as Claude or OpenAI, it could be IDEs such as Cursor, and the terminology for those is a host or a client. We'll look at that in the next slide. And what it allows again is to connect to your MCP server. So let me actually move to the next slide. The host, which could be, let's say, Claude or your IDE, Cursor, is able through a client that is embedded in it, and we'll show how to create that client, via the MCP protocol can access an MCP server. Usually that server is local to your machine, but also we're starting to see remote service. So that MCP server is something that you control, something that describes your API or other resources. So when the host, via the client and via the MCP protocol, accesses the MCP server, it's able to see what tools are available to it, and those tools might be files on the local file system, it could be a database, and it could even be remote APIs. Okay, so that's a very quick introduction. There will be links in the slides for you to go and find out more information. Now, where do we stand with MCP today? So the latest spec is about a couple of months ago, and new things that were introduced was an authorization framework that was missing before based on OAuth 2.1. The other news is that both OpenAI and Google embraced MCP, which was kind of a question mark. And I think that means that it opens the door for wide adoption of MCP, right? We know that OpenAI or Google are not going to have a competing protocol, at least for the time being. And then the other, I think, important news for me was that you could have remote hosting of MCP servers. So started out by Cloudflare and a bunch of other companies started doing this, where the MCP server no longer has to be in your machine, running in your machine with all the implications that has. And then finally, a bunch of MCP server registries came up. Smithery is a good one, MCP Get, Mastra, OpenTools, and there's probably dozens of others that I haven't included. What that allows you is to go and find the MCP server for the tool that you need, with an important caveat, as we're going to see. Um, and Deep is asking that question: MCP server is ready for production use case? Well, there are challenges. I don't think it's quite ready. There are security issues. We have to figure out and standardize API, the authentication into APIs. We have to standardize discoverability. The registries help, but it's not all. We have to figure out how do we scale the usage of an MCP server for SaaS or multi-tenant apps. And of course, not every resource or API will work through MCP. You have to be aware of the context window. You have to be aware of API complexity. We had a session last week where we talked about the design of APIs that are friendly to AI and MCP. I'll put a link in the slides for that. So no, we're not quite there yet. I would say the technology is experimental, and I would say one of the things that you have to be aware of is emerging vulnerabilities. Again, there will be links in the slides, but you'll hear a lot about this. It's a new technology. It kind of reminds me of maybe the beginnings of the web. Maybe 25 years ago, it would be as if I was putting a table of data accessed from a database, from a local database, onto the web, and not knowing about things like SQL injection or other vulnerabilities. This is kind of where we are. So we're in a test phase, and so okay, Deep is asking another question. Most of the time it just fails. Am I missing something? There's two reasons why it might fail. One is the actual configuration. So here we'll do a very, very simple configuration, like the hello world of MCP. And the other reason might be that the resources you're trying to access are perhaps not suitable for an LLM. So here we'll show one API that's public and that actually works well. Not all APIs are going to work well with MCP. And one of the purposes of this session is to get you to have a test bed where you can actually test your own APIs and see if they work via MCP with LLM. And if not, try to fix them and test them again until you get to a kind of repeatable result. All right, so here's the scenario for today's demo. You are a product manager, you are the API product manager at your organization, and of course, your goal is to make sure the API consumption continues to grow and thrive, and you get more people using your API, because that means revenue, it means meeting your goals, it means meeting whatever your product is aiming to do. And you are having indications that your customers are messing around with AI agents. They're looking at them. They're looking at how they're going to use them. And you keep hearing the buzz, as we all do, around MCP. So you'd like to get hands-on with MCP, do a very simple demo, be able to play with the technology, but also, more importantly, are thinking about putting together a prototype so you can start conversations with your customers. My API behind an MCP server, hey, my customers, go take a look at this and tell me what you think, if it works for you or not. And then finally, you'd like to be able to gauge how usable your APIs are by agents or LLMs, so that you can look at your existing portfolio of APIs and say, this works, this doesn't work, and put things on your roadmap to make them more friendly and more usable by AI and by MCP and agents. And hopefully, as you redesign or evolve your APIs, you're going to come back and test them with MCP and see if they work better. And if they do, you're on the right path. So this is our scenario. And just to make sure you have the link to the page, tinyurl.com API MCP demo. So let me launch right into that. Now, one of the things that is a prerequisite for this demo, it's a little bit more of a hacky demo than previous ones we've done. One of the things is you have to have Node.js installed on your computer, on your laptop, on your local environment. My advice, if you don't try to do it here during this demo right now. Watch the demo, watch the recording, and then go back and do it. That's what the instructions in GitHub are for. The way to know is you open up a terminal window and you type node, and if something comes back, then great. It kind of looks, let's see, it would look something like this. You would see, hey, node is there, so I can continue with my demo. If not there, just watch the demo, do it later. You can navigate to nodejs.org or use NVM or Node Version Manager and install that and have a working nodes in your laptop. The next thing you'll want to do is to make sure you have the Claude desktop client installed. So you can use Claude from Anthropic on the web, but you can also use it as a local client. I have a Mac and I have it installed here. You would go to this resource and download it. It only takes a few minutes and then it runs locally. And that's how we're going to connect to our MCP server via the client embedded in Claude. So if you do have Claude installed as a local app, it's going to look something like this. It's the chatbot interface, but in the local app. Okay. So two prerequisites: have Node, have Claude, and let's move on. Now, today, just to make it easy and just for this to be a simple hello world demo that we can complete in a short time, we're going to use a tool called Layer. It's at Build with Layer. And let me actually show you where that website is. I found that it's easily able to generate the server from OpenAPI for us. Hopefully a lot of us have OpenAPI and we can leverage that to just quickly create a server. So I would say navigate to Layer and then hit the Build Demo with MCP Server button, just like so. And then you'll get into this demo dashboards and I'll tell you exactly what to do next. So the API that we'll be using today, that we'll be playing with, is a public API. Just to make things simple for us, it doesn't have authentication. It does require that you pass a user agent to it, but it doesn't have authentication, and it lives on this website here. This is the API, so you can explore what the API does. It's from the US National Weather Service. He has all kinds of endpoints to find the current weather alerts and information that's very, very useful for people navigating. So if you go over to the right to the specification tab, you can kind of start to see that this is something that's driven by OpenAPI. And as you can see, there are a lot of resources. There's a lot going on here. In fact, there's 58, I think, resources in it. And I don't think we're going to get all of them to work with an agent or with an LLM all at the same time. So today we'll just take one and kind of avoid that problem that Deep was talking about. Hey, it didn't work. So we're going to take one and make one work and then move on from there. So the next thing you can do is grab, you see this little link here. It's the actual OpenAPI.json from this API. If you have your own API that you'd like to use, you're welcome to use that. But if I hit that link, then chances are, depending on the browser, it will open up something like this. You can just go do a save as and save it locally. And you should have a JSON file on your desktop with the OpenAPI from this service. So National Weather Service, we're grabbing the OpenAPI and we're just putting it on our desktop. Okay. So far it should be fairly simple. We're basically gotten an OpenAPI file that we can use. All right. So what's next? What we want to do next is use that OpenAPI file here to generate the MCP server. So we're going to hit the Add from OpenAPI Spec button. It's just a file upload dialog. So I'm going to click here and navigate to my OpenAPI file. Here it is. And it's just going to parse it. If everything goes well, it's going to just keep it there for you. And it's saying, I looked at the file. Now, next thing I can do is hit Generate Tools. What that does is it goes through the OpenAPI file. And as you can see, Layer now understands the APIs that are in there. It just read them from OpenAPI. As I said, don't try to include everything all in one go, because I think it's going to fail. I think it's going to be very difficult. Let's say that this is your OpenAPI and you want to start testing your own APIs. We're going to go with one. And I selected this one because I've seen that it works before it returns a relatively small payload, and I've demonstrated that it works. If, for example, you try to use the API where all the active weather alerts in the US are returned, That's a little bit of a big payload, and it is going to fail. The LLM is not going to be able to parse that. I think you can do paging there and fix that. But this one here, the alerts for a active area, it kind of restricts the output where you only requesting the weather alerts for one particular state. So hopefully that's going to work for us. So we're going to select just the one endpoint. You can select a few more. I think it just ups the chances of something failing. I'm going to select one and say add one endpoint. And now that the endpoint is added, I'm going to kind of like check this box again. And now I'm telling it which is the one API that I'd like to play with. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit a demo MCP server. This is the instructions to generate your MCP server with layer and put it into Claude. So I'm going to select Claude here. They have existing instructions for a couple of clients. Cursor is one of them, but I'm going to use Claude. I'm not worried about this key here because I'm going to rotate it by the time the recording is done. So I am going to copy this and then I'm going to follow the instructions. So it says open Claude, go to settings, go to developer, edit the configuration, and just replace the file contents with the following. So let me do that. Open Claude, go to settings, and here's the dialog. If you don't see it, go to developer, edit config. I told you it was hacky. Now I need to kind of edit this JSON file. I'm going to open it with my editor and just replace the contents. Now, two things I'm going to do here. Because I know the NWS API requires a user agent because I read the docs, I'm just going to put something here for a user agent. I can say it's, Emmanuel MCP, something like that. And hopefully that works. And then the next thing I want to do is it actually asks you to insert the parameter for the state or the area here. I'm going to remove that and make Claude pass it in from the inputs. And then I'm going to hit save. So this is saved. And then another step that I need to do is go over to Claude. And in order for the changes to take effect, I'm going to need to quit Claude and start it again. So don't forget to do that, otherwise the changes don't take effect. And now for the moment of truth, we're going to see if these changes took effect. Now, if something goes wrong, when Claude starts up, it looks at the tools in the MCP servers that are configured, and it will give you an error, and it will prompt you to look at the log file and see what's wrong. I don't see an error here, so hopefully everything's okay. Next thing I could do, and I could ask Claude, what tools can you use? And hopefully that will give us a listing of tools and include the weather alert API that we included. So here are all the built-in tools. And as we can see, it did include the weather alerts. So it kind of figured it out. It says, I have the weather alert there, and I can check active weather alerts for different US states and marine areas. Okay, that's good because it means that the MCP configuration there worked. So the next thing we can do is we can say, give me the active weather alerts for area CA for California, and hopefully again that's going to work. So Claude is asking us, it's putting this human in the loop and saying, hey, are you sure you want to use the tool? Authorize me to use the tool. So I'm just going to say allow once here. And as we can see, it's reaching out to the API with a specific request. Hopefully it'll get a response and it'll give us a look at the response, and it will also interpret the response. Okay, so this is probably a Claude error that we saw here, unexpected capacity. This could mean that either Claude is having high usage or maybe there's something wrong with the API. Let's try it again. I haven't seen that error before, but hey, we're going to try it again. Okay, one person, two people say it worked for them. That's great. Maybe we're all hitting it all at the same time, and it's not working. I'm going to try once more. If not, please know that it works. Yeah, live demo. Whoop-de-doo. It all works. Okay. All right. It is taking its time. Oh, okay. It did do it. All right. So let's see what it came up with. So here's the response. This is the response from the API. And this is Claude's interpretation. It's talking about a heat advisory, extreme heat watch, good times. It's giving you advice about the heat advisory and so on. So we were able to make the API call, and in this case, it worked for us. It worked, after a couple of tries, you could run into these problems. Now, this particular API is kind of well designed for LLMs. I think if you try others, it might fail. And I would encourage you to use something like this to try out different APIs, try out your own APIs. All right. So let's go back to our slides and we move through all of this. That should all be good. And this is my takeaways from this session. So first of all, as you saw, it's kind of hacky. You have to play around with configuration files. Something needs to be installed locally. There's a lot going on. And also we talked about the possible vulnerabilities. It's very early days. You probably shouldn't be playing around with, let's say, customer or sensitive data with this. The way I would do it is for my API is I would give it access to a sandbox environment with data that doesn't really matter because I would be interested in assessing the usability of the API. So I would just throw the sandbox environment in and test the APIs in the sandbox environment and know that if they work in the sandbox environment, chances are they're going to work in the production environment. You have to have OpenAPI, complete validated OpenAPI. If you want to do this workflow here is a must. You don't need it for an MCP server, but I happen to think it's a good way to create an MCP server. Try to test maybe a few APIs at a time or at least one API at a time and go from there. And for APIs to be usable in the scenario, they must be simple. The payload should be restricted. They should be small because of the context window, because of hallucinations, and so on. And note that not every API will work every time. And your job is to kind of look at the APIs and see what works and start making iterations and evolutions on your API to make it work. But when it works, there's a lot of possibility. You could make the LLM do amazing things with a couple of APIs and with data access to current data. So think about what the possibilities are. Your customers, I'm sure, will come in and tell you all about that. And where to go from here? And we'll get to your questions. I see there's questions in the chat. We'll get to them. So if you like the use of the Layer tool, you can go claim your account or register for Layer. It will give you access to analytics and it will persist. I think they delete the data after 7 days if you don't sign up for it. There are other tools out there. Layer is not the only open API to MCP. I think Speakeasy has one, and probably Stainless has another one. So there's many tools out there. The space is evolving, but Layer works pretty well. You can also try additional clients. Try it with either ChatGPT or maybe in an IDE like Cursor. You could try next an API that requires authentication. Maybe that's your API in your sandbox environment. And then as a further project, you could say you're hosting your MCP server so that others, third parties, clients, can hit it and try to use it remotely. And then finally, you should publish once you're sure of your MCP server, you should publish it to directories like Smithery for others to discover and find out. That's going to give you more exposure for your MCP server, bearing in mind all the vulnerability and security concerns that we have. And then slowly over time, evolve and redesign your APIs for improved reliability. If you want to know more about that, we did a session last week. I'm going to put in the link to the recording here in the chat. And in that lesson, we talked about how to redesign your APIs for maximum friendliness to LLMs and agents. So that's going to help with APIs being actually usable from LLMs. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, of course, is I do have product management courses that I do around APIs. I have a fundamentals course for people that are just starting out, don't know much about APIs. I have a API product mastery course that's more about AI and building out APIs and building a portfolio of APIs. So you can check those out. They're pretty highly rated. The mastery course is coming up on June 5, so pretty soon. There's a couple of codes here. First 5 signups with code agents get $250 off. Anybody on their recording can use the code MCP for $150 off. So I'd encourage you to check these out because you'll learn more about APIs and kind of more about what we talked about with hands-on demos from here. And last but not least, I want you to keep thinking about the API product manager opportunity. There's only a few of us. We're only about a 5% of total PMs. That's us, API and platform product managers. And of course, traffic from APIs is increasing, usage of APIs is increasing, and API PMs on average get paid more, about 19% more per recent study. So think about that. And if you want to learn more about API product management, of course, I'm here with free sessions, but also the paid courses that we talked about. So with that, let's go to Q&A. I saw some questions here in the chat. Keep throwing them in and keep upvoting them, and we'll talk about it. So can I share some docs of how to connect LangGraph agents with our MCP? I don't have that. Perhaps if somebody has it, I see Kevin Swiber is in the chat. Maybe, Kevin, you have some resources on that. I don't have any resources that I can share, but I'm going to make a note and include them in the email that's going out tomorrow with further resources. So Kevin has a link there. Thank you for that. And I'm making a note for that. Okay. What's another question? There's a screenshot there. I'm not too sure if that's a question or not. Can LLM tell us how it can and can't use the API provided? Can it test it out with various data and give an analysis? Prachi is asking the question of, well, look, there's 3 levels to this. First of all, if the MCP server is misconfigured, you are going to get an error in Claude or your clients that you have, and you're going to look at the logs and find out why that is. If so, perhaps the API doesn't exist. There's some kind of misconfiguration. You would find that information there. If the LLM can't see your API, you're going to know by perhaps asking it, as we did, what tools the LLM has access to. You can interactively prompt it and ask it, what tools do you see? So you're going to be able to see if the APIs are accessible. So that means if they are accessible, if they appear as tools, it means it can use them. Now, whether it can complete the task with them is a different story, and you're only going to find out by trying to invoke the API via the LLM and finding out. If it can't do it, it will throw some kind of error, it will say, hey, I tried this, I couldn't do it. And it will try to be helpful by going out on the web and finding information that's relevant. Um, you could, I think, with good prompting, ask it to go through some test cases. Say, hey, you have this tool. Read the description of the tool and try to build out some test cases for using this tool. And the LLM would be helpful, and it would try to use those test cases. Would it be exhaustive in its testing? I don't know. That would be up to the prompt, I guess. Okay. Yeah. Well, AN is saying, Layer is working on an MCP eval framework. That's great. I guess that pretty covers what you need. Can somebody share the MCP server config here? I'll paste it in a moment. Actually, let's do this. And even though it includes my credentials here, but I will rotate those credentials, so no huge worry. This is what it would look like. Um, Let me go through all the questions and I'll get back to that last question. Let's see. Um, is the route API, fast API, MCP a better option for going directly from API to MCP? Great question. I haven't tried it. Has anybody else tried it? I know Kevin Swibert, you've tried a bunch of stuff. Have you tried that? Build MCP from fast API, like have a implementation and then build MCP?
I haven't tried that personally, but there is a huge community of fast API and fast MCP folks out there. I think Tada is a company that's doing some fast API MCP work with some open source stuff out there. So yeah, there's because AI has such a huge Python community. There's a lot of fairly advanced stuff in the Python ecosystem for MCP.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if you could drop a link in here, if you can. If not, again, I'll try to find it and include it in the resources email. Okay, a couple more questions. Curious, what's the path for MCP enabling a gRPC based microservices architecture? So gRPC is an API, let's call it API protocol promoted by Google. It's mostly used, I think, these days for internal APIs or microservices. Google also has public APIs for it. I'm sure there's going to be some tools that are going to emerge for consuming gRPC APIs. I haven't seen anything quite yet, just because most APIs that are out there in public are not gRPC. They're mostly like these HTTP REST APIs or even GraphQL APIs. I think any API or any resource is going to be suitable to use with MCP. Remember, MCP, it's not just about APIs. It's about accessing any type of data. It could be a database, it could be anything. And if there's an MCP server for it, the LLM will speak to the data. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that gRPC is either out there already or is going to come up. Thank you, Kevin, for the Fast API link. And another question is, hey, things are changing a lot. Yep, absolutely they are. And the spec is evolving. We're seeing a whole lot of new things. Would you advise to implement our own MCP servers? I would advise it, as I said in one of the slides, to be experimental. This is not something that you would say, hey, customers, go use this in your day-to-day reliably. Some large companies that are throwing resources at it could be doing that. But my advice for most people is going to be play with the technology, learn the technology, and get the feedback from your customers. I since it's evolving, I would not say that it's going to be a core part of my product just this moment, but it is something you're going to have to research. It is something that you're going to have to look into and be able to answer questions for customers. Let's see. I thought there was one more question. I think Kevin answered the question from Imran. Can MCP receive events and webhooks? Uh, yeah, I can see a world where that happens and where it would be useful for sure. Um, let's see. MCP clients that are open source, yes, absolutely. And again, thank you, Kevin, for answering that questions. There's a bunch of, first of all, if you go to GitHub, let's see, is this it? So this is GitHub's, this is MCP's GitHub repo. And if you start poking around, there are going to be reference implementation clients and so on. So there's a lot out there. Secondly, there's all these registries that we talked about. If you Google MCP registry, or better, use an LLM or use Perplexity to say which are the most popular MCP registries, you're going to find out registries beginning with Smithery or Open or a bunch of other registries that exist out there, and you are going to find example MCP servers. Now, you're going to have to be careful because there's nothing saying that the MCP server that you got off the internet from a registry is either A, official or kind of non-malicious, or is well written. So that's going to be like a caveat for you. All right. Any other questions? Should we use these auto MCP tools or should we create our own? I think eventually you're going to create your own. As you start to learn more about MCP, you're going to start coding your own. I think the converters are great to start with. I think they're a great starting point. So imagine if I was the National Weather Service, I have 58 APIs there. I want to start writing everything from scratch. That's a bit of a stretch. So the converter from OpenAPI to MCP, I think, is really really handy. So I guess it's a good starting point. But like with anything, eventually once you go deeper, you're going to start coding. Well, you can actually also use LLMs to help you with that coding. They do have access to the spec and they do understand MCP, and they are going to be very useful for you to build with. All right. Any other question? Any final question? Awesome questions, by the way, and some quite kind of difficult questions there, and quite thought provoking. Anything else that you have? Hope the demo worked for most of you. If not, do use. Okay, how do I see MCP evolving? I think it's very early days. I think it's going to be the dominant protocol, and I think in about 6 months or a year from now, it's going to be completely unrecognizable. There is in the again here in the repo and Anthropic's documentation, there is a roadmap, and there is also a discussion group around the evolution of MCP, which you can, by the way, participate into as well. I think the main things that you're going to see are a better approach to security and authorization. I think you're going to see a whole lot of use of remote MCP servers, so you can host your own MCP servers that others can access in real time. I think that's going to be two big things. And then I think also you're going to start to see more tooling around MCP. Uh, that though is not going to happen until the spec stabilizes, and right now it's evolving almost every month or every couple of months. A2A, that's a very good question. So A2A is an agent-to-agent protocol that Google launched about a month ago. Like I said, all this stuff is evolving fast. In the beginning, we thought that, oh, is this a competitor to MCP? And it turns out not only it's not a competitor, but Google actually said, hey, we love MCP and you should use A2A alongside MCP. I think I have a backup slide here somewhere. Here it is. So here's what that looks like. A2A or agent to agent protocol is for communicating between agents, passing data and orchestrating between agents. MCP is the protocol that agents will use to access data or APIs. Could I share the link if it's public? Yeah, I mean, I think it's just off the A2A documentation. It's somewhere, it should be somewhere here, perhaps. If you dig around, you're going to find that link. Okay, don't want to scroll too much here, but it is from their documentation. I think this is the announcement, but they do have all their documentation online, and you're going to be able to find it. I'll send it in the resources. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If not, thank you for attending. Thank you for trying out the demo, and some of you succeeding with it. That's awesome to see. That means that it's fairly easy to do. And I will share the slides link. Of course, it's coming in an email tomorrow. So you'll get an email today with the recording and tomorrow with the slides and more resources. Thank you for attending. Thank you for trying things out. Do keep learning about MCP. Ping me with any questions. Ping Kevin Swiber with any questions. And thank you very much to him for jumping in here. And also the Layer folks are very, very open to question. You can find them on LinkedIn. Talk to Andrew Hamilton. He's the founder and super open to questions. Go hit him up with questions on there. So here's Kevin. Great. And do reach out to us on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Thank you all very much and have a good rest of the day.